Hi Pisces, this is Lee at Fresh Astrology, and we are looking at the final quarter of 2018. So that means in your case, we're looking at the final week or so in October and November, the full month in December, and I'll do a New Year forecast next. But right now I can no longer do the monthlies due to my schedule, so this is my compromise, so I can still do some free forecasts for everybody. So when I do talk about the energy and what's going on with the planets, and yes, they impact us through their energy, how else would they impact us is my question. But when we talk about the energy of the planets and what's going on with them, you can also apply it to what has been happening in October and notice what's been going on in your world. How has it been impacting you? What are you noticing about what's going on? Is equally powerful, if not more powerful, is what you observe about your own life. Sometimes it's true of some people that there is very little observation about their own life. They're just kind of an autopilot. And it would be good, I don't think most of the people watching me regularly are like that, but even the best of us, if we're trying to be more self-aware and do self-work and notice stuff, to develop an awareness, we can get caught up in this kind of just being on autopilot. So notice about yourself if that's happening as well. But one of the main sort of dynamics that's influencing us all during October and November is this opposition of Uranus retrograde with Venus retrograde. And then the Sun has now moved into this picture as well. For a while we had Mercury there, so it's been an intensified, more noticeable energy. Because of the retrograde and because there's a personal planet involved, Venus, you may notice people coming in from the past, a little of that going on in some cases. Not for everybody, but for some people you may notice a person surprisingly show up from your past. And if that's the case with you, then it could be at work. It could be somebody from school or at school who shows up unexpectedly. It could be somebody showing up on a trip. You bump into them or you meet them or go see somebody from the past. And again, this will be something that's unfolding as of October, unfolding in November, unfolding in December, and into the early part of the new year. So it's not on any particular day. A lot of people ask me, well, on what day will this happen? And I don't know if that's as useful. You can study. It's easy to look up what day something is turning around, going direct, going retrograde. It's easy to look that information up. I think what's more interesting is to notice the overall pattern. That is a part of the self-awareness. If I tell you and all we focus on is, if I spoon feed you, like on this day look for this, and on this day look for this, you lose the ability to develop your own observation skills around the patterns developing in your own life. So I'd like to take myself off autopilot and take you guys off autopilot, or encourage you to, remind yourselves to get off autopilot as much as possible by spoon feeding, like, mark this day on your calendar for this and this day on your, that's a more autopilot, please. That's what that is to me. It feels like to me. So this dynamic is taking place on the cusp of really 4 different houses. On one end of the chart we've got Aries and Taurus down kind of in this area of work and family and learning small skills, driving around your neighborhood, getting to know a new place, maybe a new kind of vehicle, a new mode of transportation may be coming into play. Stuff with your siblings could be changing. A new job. So we have this area where Uranus is hanging out on the cusp between Aries and Taurus. So Aries and Taurus are very different from what's across the way. We have the other retrograde planet, an important planet in opposition to Uranus, Venus retrograde, is on the other end of your chart, exactly opposite, and it's between Libra and Scorpio, which represent very different things. Libra and Scorpio have far more to do with the people in your world. Weirdly, they're kind of in the part of your chart where the meaning is very different in the area of the chart where they are, but I still think they represent people. In your case, it seems like they could be international. You may be working more with international groups, people at a distance, people in the law, maybe, legal groups, international. Some of you may be, like your job, somehow maybe you work more with international people, or you're learning a foreign language, you're going back to school. There's a big theme for Pisces about learning something new, maybe embarking on a new course of learning. So some of you are literally going into university, some of you are actually graduating, but it's like you're in the school of life. So now you take everything you've learned and you apply it to something brand new. So there are themes, again, of the law, international, using technology, being online perhaps, using the internet, publishing, teaching, learning, all these themes are there. So you just kind of play with those words and see how it applies to you. But Jupiter is right at the top of your chart, also on the cusp. There are many indicators on the chart that are hanging out on this threshold. Threshold, is where one can quickly move over it, but there's this sense of, in many places of the chart, for everybody, there's this pause where things will be changing very quickly soon, maybe not just yet. So a lot of people are just poised on this time, this new era, the brink of a new era where things change very rapidly. So I realize not all countries and not all cultures listening to me understand the game of dominoes, but they're these little tiny bricks, these little tiny pieces that you set up very carefully, and you create a pattern, and you intentionally set them close to one another. It's this little game, and you can make a design, and then when you tip the first one over, it tips the next one over, and then so on and so on. So then they all fall down in a pattern. So I've used this analogy before, but it's as though, while we're on the brink, the threshold of change, all these little dominoes are getting placed in a pattern, and then at some point something's going to tip, and then it's going to tip everything else, and then suddenly you have, boom, whole new life, whole new change. And it's happening for all of us somewhere. And in several places on our chart. Usually when something does change in one area of our chart, it does tend to change some other area. So it's normal for that to happen too. For some people, the change is bigger than others, but I do think a lot of people are making some important changes in the world. So let's get back to this Uranus and Venus opposition. So Uranus is poised between Aries, this area of new starts, and over the last 7 years you've had so many new starts, possibly things that disrupted marriages, close relationships, possibly things very disruptive in your work life. There have been lots of changes and about faces and just kind of this feeling of upsets. Money coming in and going out has been kind of disruptive, lots of change and disruption there. And now what's happening is that energies had moved kind of out of that area, and you'd had a little bit of stability, maybe from May to now. And now there's this feeling of we're going to change yet again. But I suspect for a lot of you, if you had some negative downturns in finances or some surprise abrupt endings of jobs, maybe even abrupt ending of relationships. I think for a lot of you, if you've been laying your dominoes carefully and trying to rebuild from any upsets, then in coping with the change, learning to use technology, maybe going into fields of technology and realizing that is where you belong, using tools that are technological, definitely helps a Pisces. Or things to do with travel and flying, also inventions. But if you've been laying those dominoes carefully after all those upsets and kind of learning the lessons, then I think this dip of Uranus back, it's going to move back over the threshold into your second house, into Aries briefly, to, I think for many of you, reward you for all that you've been doing. Because you've been on a steep learning curve since last spring in my zone, but let's plug it into a month. Let's say March, April, May, June, July, August, September. Steep learning curve in whatever it is you're doing. And now that will probably cause some other big changes and maybe a quick uptick in income. And then by March, you'll really see what the result is. So I think you'll see in November and December some of these big changes unfolding and kind of see what's unfolding. But this is something that really is going to be rippling through next year. And you'll get the cleanest, clearest vision of what these changes will mean for you, especially financially and job-wise, coming up in March 2019 and beyond. But you'll know, you'll have a feeling for some of this now, especially how it plays into what's happening with Venus across the chart. So it does look very financial for you. There may be a surprise inheritance, a surprise tax refund, a surprise payoff with investments, surprise partnership in your work world. But money, it does seem like there's some pleasant, I would think for most of you, surprises in money. And sometimes there'll be more than one. So maybe on one hand you find out that you owe a little bit more in taxes, so that may be an unpleasant surprise. But then at the same time, something big is going on in your career and your finances. So maybe you have more than enough money to take care of it. So whereas you thought, oh, this negative stuff is happening, really down the line, if you're playing your dominoes right and playing life correctly, and by correct there's no one way to do it, but just been using what's been learning from what's happening in your world to adjust and to, and the lessons are going to be unique for each person, but you've been learning something about money, what it's like to have a lot and a little and a lot and a little, learning some lessons about spending versus earning, savings perhaps, whatever you've been learning over the past 7 years around money and spending and saving and earning, I think for many of you it's going to pay off in a big way. And there is this big lucky trend with Jupiter moving over your midheaven during this time of this quarter and really positively impacting your career. So big lucky changes, probably more money. Now, for some of you, if the lessons have been really challenging and you've been resisting the lessons, then there's just more stuff will come up in your world to help point you in the right direction. So if you've been resisting changing jobs, or you've been resisting learning something, you didn't want to learn something new, you didn't want to learn how to use the computer, you didn't want to do something, you're going to get more pressure. But also lucky opportunities to help you learn. Lucky, because Jupiter's still here to bring some luck, but it may at first point a spotlight on you and what you have yet to learn. But take it as an opportunity, a spotlight that helps you see, I still need to learn this. And try to remove any internal blockages that have held you back. Lots of new people in your world, some coming back from the past, some influences from the past, but also new people in your world. There's this feeling of your world expanding through knowledge, through possibly travel. Your world is expanding. So just enjoy that process. Enjoy what's coming in from afar, from travel, from meeting people very different from you. Just enjoy that expansion and kind of go with that tide. Another place where we have an influence on a cusp, another threshold of sorts, is where the North Node is. The North Node is transitioning from Leo into Cancer, and this is happening because of the direction of the North Node. It's always moving in the opposite direction of the way the planets normally move around the sun. The North Node moves the opposite way, so it is moving from the 6th house into the 5th house. So it's moving out of Leo into Cancer. So it's changing, kind of the energy of the zodiac sign. Leo's very, it's got this bold, predatory is the wrong word. I'll think of another word. But anyway, where it's going, it's moving out of your health zone, where you may have been focused on your daily schedule and the health of other people around you a lot. It was kind of your time when North Node was in Leo to focus on the health of others, to be influenced by that, to have to cope with that, to have to deal with that. And also your own health. How do you juggle those two things? How do you juggle taking care of yourself versus taking care of others? And it's not versus and like they're opposing you, but you've had to pay attention even when you haven't wanted to. Maybe there are times when you didn't want to look after someone else's health and you felt burdened by it, but you've been forced to some degree. Now the North Node really wants you to pay attention to children. It wants you to pay attention to having fun. It wants you to pay attention to romance. It wants you to pay attention to your own creativity and what you're nurturing in your life. So if there's some new career venture, because there's a lot of career indication here, then nurture your career. Like if you have a new company or a startup business, I guess it's a new company, or a company, something you're doing. You don't have to be working for others, but 5th house, sometimes 4th house, can show where we are doing our own venture, our own company or creative project. So you may feel like nurturing some creativity, nurturing some romance. There's something you have to learn about how to nurture children here too. And by nurture, it doesn't mean hold them more tightly. Sometimes it means learning, as your kids age, we nurture differently. When they're babies, you nurture them a very specific way. When they're tweens, you do a different way, and then as they're aging up into college age and beyond, you learn a new way to parent. So there's some kind of where it'll cause you to stretch and grow. So if you're like, oh, I already nurture my kids so well, I've got that down. I talk to them every day. I cook for them even though they're in their 20s. The North Node doesn't want more of the same. The North Node wants you to learn some new, evolved way to stretch and grow, to be in that relationship with your kids. So it may mean you learn not to call them every single day, especially if they're in their 20s or 30s, maybe every other day. Or maybe you don't still send cookies, but you learn a new way to relate to a child. You learn something new. And then there may be, for some of you who have fertility issues, there's something here about that. And that's a more complicated read, and I don't want to I know that's such a vulnerable time for people. Or if there's a health issue with a child, that's a more vulnerable kind of reading. I'm not going to do that here. But the main message of the North Node is not, there's nothing scary so much. I just don't want to go down that rabbit hole because it's very, it's not, this message isn't for everybody. And that one is a more sensitive area. So I just would choose my words carefully and take more time with that. But I would say that as it moves out of the house of health and how you schedule your world, which hopefully you've been working on how you schedule and care for yourself in addition to others maybe. But here it's taking the focus off medicine and going to doctors. It's taking you're going away from that and kind of control it, because this is that the sixth house is also ruled by Virgo, so it's like a more controlling, task-oriented, routinized. The focus needs to shift now for your own health and development toward having more spontaneous fun, being more spontaneous, enjoying yourself, tapping into your creative world, your right brain, and just really loosening up and having fun. So sometimes with fertility, I've heard lots of stories around this, and it's not always true, but in some cases, there's been too much tension and this uptight feeling about going to doctors and doing all these complicated things you have to do to try to have a baby if it's hard for you. This is more about just relax, just let it go for a while. And I mean, my own aunt, after she relaxed, and they actually adopted a child, 2 children, they finally relaxed, and then she immediately had a baby, naturally, very quickly, easily, because she had relaxed. And I know that, the story, a lot of friends too, when they relaxed, it was a lot easier. And sometimes that's the message, but you're meant, with the North Node going to the 5th house, to focus on the themes of the 5th house, but in a fun, more relaxed, joyful, celebrating life kind of way. Not the controlled Virgo, I need to have a checklist and a spreadsheet. No. It's just letting go a little bit. Let's see what else. We're going to go more into December. So by the time we get into December, Jupiter, when it first enters a sign, it zooms in and moves, makes a lot of ground, moves forward quickly. And so there's a lot of quick motion in the end of November and December into this new territory, new job possibly, new presence, new direction, career direction. It has a very lucky feel to it. You're able to communicate well. There's a lot of messaging, the ability to a lot of talks, a lot of meetings, probably a lot of talking to others, and so a lot of action in that particular area. If you're not in a career right now, or you're still in school, or you're older and maybe you're semi-retired or retired, this has more to do with your life direction and where you're headed, and making conscious decisions around where you're headed. There will be things that happen in life that force you to think about where you're going and to have a bit of a plan. You'll have a lot of help. People in high places will tend to want to help you. You're meeting some very important people in power, who are likely to want to help you structure and evolve whatever it is you're doing. My advice is you want to do kind of 2 things. You want to have your own mind and be able to make decisions for yourself. At the same time, during this particular time in life, you do have a lot of people willing to help you. Whether you're just taking classes and you're learning from them, and that's sort of a type of help, even though they may, if you buy online classes or take remote classes with a university, maybe these people in high places, if they're teachers, don't always know you personally, but they're still there influencing you. So it could be like that. Or you may be introduced and have people noticing you who are in kind of high positions and who really want to help you structure yourself so you build a strong future for yourself, which is lovely. There is a careful dance here where you are a bit careful not to let someone totally control you. Somebody in a high place totally taking charge, because we also have Uranus down here in the second, third house. You want to make sure you're still independent somehow. And again, independence, we have to define. It doesn't mean you're totally separate from, but you still have your own independence, your own thinking skills. You're kind of a free agent. Even if you work for somebody, you have the sense of being in control of yourself and your own destiny. So it's not just to be a pawn on a board where powerful people move you around. It's to also play a very integral role and go where you want to go. So there's a bit of a dance, a little bit of both here, if you understand what I mean. Pay attention to that. So if you're much younger, don't let somebody like a bunch of grown-ups tell you, even if they're very impressive. Make sure you're using your own skill and knowledge about yourself and touch base with how, you know, your heart, what do you really want to happen to you? How do you want to live your life? Don't only listen to those in charge or impressive people who have a lot of power. They could open a lot of doors for you, but maybe that's going in the wrong direction. So you want to kind of do a little bit of noticing what opportunities are available, noticing how you feel about them, and then, you know, moving forward based on that information. So you want to maintain your own independence as well. And you can do that and still work for others, but feel like you're collaborating with them to make the best decision for you. So let's just keep that in mind. We don't want to be pawns on someone else's chessboard. We want it. So powerful people can come in and do that and maybe have all good intentions, but are they placing us where we really want to go and be? When I'm quiet, I'm just looking. So there's something about whatever career path you're on. And again, if you're much older, you're kind of semi-retired or retired, this will have more to do with how you're expressing your values in the world. Sometimes we get to an age where we're not working anymore, but we could still volunteer. We could still express our values in some way. Maybe we give to charities, or maybe we like the volunteer work. But somehow we come forward and we try to heal the wounds in people, the world, by really stepping up to the plate, being brave about revealing our values and being courageous enough to live from our values. So if you're really much older at an advanced age where the career is not the issue, it's how do you take this statesman-like era of life where you're the statesman, the stateswoman, the statesperson, and it's your job to lead the way ethically, use the lifetime accumulation of knowledge and maturity to better the world. And it could be in a very small way. It could be by just changing a couple of lives or one life, focusing on how you can help the world in general. But it doesn't have to be some huge endeavor that's, you know, big in scope and very expensive. It could be like just helping one person. You know, you see one homeless person every time you go to the store, you learn something about them. I'm just making this up on the fly, and you either maybe just in the holiday season you bring them blankets and a couple of really good hot meals, or you help connect their skill with a job that's available. I don't know. But that's a very small way. You can see how it could be very small, and it doesn't have to be this huge expensive thing, this big, I'm going to change the whole world, but maybe you change one person's world by living from your values. And all of Pisces can do that, even if you're still in the working world, even if you do have a career, you're still called to do some of what I just said. It's a great time to be doing something like that. And by doing so, you heal a wound inside of you. Often when we go and start healing others, even if it's just one person, just that one homeless person who you pass every day, when we set about to heal that situation, it loops around, it boomerangs kind of, and comes back and heals us. So often the best, the recipient of that charitable act is really us. And that doesn't mean we do it for selfish reasons, but the weird thing is when we really truly want to help others or one other person, it comes back and it helps us tenfold. It's meant to be that way. It's not a selfish thing. It's really giving from the joy of giving out of your true values. Somehow it comes back and we get paid back tenfold. Just by the feelings that we have about it, whatever comes from it, it actually improves us and heals us when we do that. And you continue to host Neptune in your sign, which is vibing very nicely with, it had been vibing with Jupiter and kind of infused Jupiter with the meaning, they've been working together. And now in this time frame, you see Mercury and Venus, the sun will have gone through here, the moon will have gone through several times. So there's a lot vibing off of this Neptune in your sign and informing it. And Neptune in your sign is informing all the stuff moving through the ninth house and across your midheaven. So there's some very public actions you're taking. You're more out into the world. Rather, if you're a Pisces and you're kind of feeling like you're living like a hermit, that's a little weird that's a little strange. There may be some of you because you have a different rising sign or something, but this is a time of being very outward and going out into the world, whether it's through travel or your work takes you out into the world or all the people you're meeting take you out into the world. Events are tending to pull you out so that you're not in this little hermit shell. So think about, if that feels true for you. And it's a great time to have Jupiter going across your midheaven. Enjoy that. Really enjoy and notice what's happening around you during this time as Jupiter goes over your midheaven. All right, see you guys in the new year. I'll do the new year forecast. All right, bye.